Now when it comes to formatting your controls within the report here, like for example I've got too many decimal places, I want to format that, bring it down to let's say a fixed decimal of 2 decimal places, scroll down to the bottom. We've got a long date here, maybe you want to reformat that, a short date, or maybe there's some numbers that are being cut off. As we learned in an earlier training video, learn how to resize the fields and format them. Let's go ahead and do that. Come up here, right click on the tab, go to the design view. And we're looking at the purchase price text box. Again, you can tell the difference between text boxes and their corresponding labels because the text boxes have a white background and their labels are transparent. So what I want to do is I want to bring up the property sheet for this text box by double-clicking on the border really fast. And coming up here to the Alt tab, let's say that we want the decimal places not to be auto, but click on the drop-down arrow and go just to 2. Select it. Let's go ahead and click the View button. It's still bringing it up. Well, the format that I want is fixed. So the operative word being fixed, let's go back to right-clicking, going back to our design view, and saying, well, 2 decimal places, but the format has to be when you click on the drop-down arrow. Oh, this is ridiculous. Let's hover over the left-hand side and click and drag and stretch the property sheet open a bit. Click on the drop-down arrow, and we say that it wants to be fixed. Okay, fixed to how many decimal places? 2. Now when we go ahead and click on the View button, there we go, 2 decimal places. Back to our design view, let me go ahead and right click, go back to design, and down at the bottom in the page footer we have the today's date. It's the function equals now, and again we covered this in the Excel training video. I mean, there are many functions that we learn about in Excel that you can bring over and apply them here in Access, and this is one of them. So it brings in today's date, and it was the long date. Go ahead and select it. Now before I go ahead and change it, I want you to know that to create this is very simple. All you have to do is go ahead and come up here on the Design tab in the Controls group, and just like we learned in the previous training video, we added a text box. When I clicked on it, I went down here and clicked and dragged it to make it this big. It also added its corresponding label. I don't need the label for today's date because it should be apparent that when you see a date, that it's a date field. I mean, you don't need a label saying this is the date. So I deleted it, and what I did is I typed in the function equals now. So once I have it selected, bring up the property sheet for it. If you don't see it, then you can double click on the border or come up here on the Design tab to the Tools group, click on Property Sheet. There it is, equals now. And then you can see that the format's long date. Click on the drop down arrow and you can see it. Well, again, you can click and drag and stretch this out some more. And there we go. We can see the sample of the long date. How about if we do short date? Okay. Then I can click and drag and push that back. And like I said, when it comes to fields that maybe a bit too long or too big, you got these little handles. I don't know if you can see them, but when you hover over a handle, a corner handle, top middle handle, you get the two-way arrow. That means you can go ahead and expand and contract that field. But if you hover over the border where there's no handles, you get the four-way arrow. That means you can move it in any 4 directions there, not expand it or shrink the text box here. So let's go ahead and hover over the right middle handle, click and drag and pull that back. And notice when I'm clicking and dragging and pulling it back, I don't know if you can see it, let me let go. I want you to watch down here in the status bar that when I click on that middle handle and I click and drag it open, shows you how many characters are available or will be seen when I stretch it out, well, yay big, 35. Let's go ahead and take a look at it now. By changing views, click on the report view, scroll down to the bottom here. There's the short date, and I don't need a label for it that tells me it's the date. Applying a theme is really simple, but first, what is a theme? It's a combination of colors and fonts. So for example, let's take a look at some. By coming up here, right-clicking, going to either the Layout view or the Design view, either one. When you come up here in the Design view, on the Design tab, you've got the Themes group. Now, prior to Access 2010, Access had auto format, where you can automatically apply a theme to it, but instead they took that out, so auto format, well, at least up here on the ribbons, no longer available. But instead, in its place, we have themes. So you have themes, which is a combination of colors and fonts. So you can click on the drop-down arrow. Well, before I do this, let me click off in a blank area. Because the thing about with themes is that once you apply it, it stays. You can't undo it. So if I click on the drop-down arrow, and I go ahead and I select a theme, you don't get the undo button. And if you close out, you say you don't want to save it, and you double-click and open it back up, it still has that theme applied. So let me right-click and go back to the Design view, and then click on the Themes drop-down arrow and see if I can remember what theme it was previously. It was Office. In fact, when you hover over the theme, there's the name, Office. Click on that. Okay, in any case, you get the idea. So when I hover over it, any one of these, you see how it updates the colors and also the font? So the font, wow, it's pretty big. Just look over to the right when I hover over this, you can see the change that's being applied. And I'm on Austin right now. Click on it, and in fact, probably a better view when it comes to applying or looking at your themes to see what's going to look best is that if we go to our layout view, because when I right-click and go to layout, it shows all the records, and it shows that, well, with the font that I chose in that theme, it's pretty huge and it's being cut off. The labels are overlapping, so I'd have to go ahead and click on it and hover over the right and expand it and try to resize it or manually change the font size, bring it down just a bit. In any case, in this view, I can come back up to themes, click on the drop-down arrow, and go back to where I was, maybe the office. When I choose that, notice that the colors and the fonts that are coordinating with that theme. I don't have to go with the overall theme. I could just go ahead and say, okay, let's just change the colors. Let's choose aspect. Changed it to gray. I don't see much of a difference here. Or I can just change the fonts and say we want something Franklin. In any case, you get the idea. If you want something that applies really fast across the board, then go ahead and work with your themes, either the combination of colors and fonts or separately with the color or with the font, in which case I'm going to hit undo, and remember, undoing it doesn't undo the theme, so I have to click on the themes drop-down arrow, and I remember it was Office. I like that. That's my favorite. Click on it, and from what I've done so far, I want to be sure to save my work. When it comes to inserting an image into your report, it's really simple. In fact, I want to insert my company's logo in the upper right-hand corner. Now, when it comes to you doing the exercises on this DVD, I'm not going to have my logo on there, but I will have an image for you because I don't want my logo copied throughout the entire world. So let's come up here, right-click, go to the design view, and then to insert the image, there's two ways you can do it. One way I don't like, and that's coming up here on the Design tab to the Controls group, clicking on the More button. You see the image right there, the button. When you click on it, you get a plus sign when you hover down below, and you can see the icon next to it saying, okay, when you click here, we're going to insert an image of your choosing. So when I click here, it opens up a window and it says, okay, where's your image? Well, I know my image in the exercise folder on the desktop, but when I'm in the exercises folder, it doesn't show anything in that folder. I know I have files within that folder. The reason why it's not showing is because it's looking for a particular type of file or file type, a Windows meta file. Click on the drop-down arrow and say that we want to see all files. So I have the book's image for you, but for me I'm going to insert my Dreamforce logo. Double click on it, and when I do it, that just looks horrible. I mean, if I right-click and go to Report View, it's not going to change. Let me right-click and go back to the Design View. So let me delete that, and like I said, the better way to insert an image so it's clear that I find quickly is to come up here on the Design tab over here to the Insert Image, click on the drop-down arrow, click Browse. I'm in the same folder, Exercises, but it's looking for a different type of a file, a bitmap. Click on the drop-down arrow and say that we want to see all. And there's my Dreamforce logo. It's a ping image file. Double click on it. Come over here. You can see the plus sign and then the image down below where my pointer's at. Click on it and boom. I mean, wow. Looks so much better, doesn't it? In fact, if it doesn't quite fit within the box, you may want to resize your image outside of Access, but there's some things I can show you in case if you don't want to do it and you have to work with the image. For example, when you hover over one of these handles, the bottom right-hand corner, you see my pointer turns into arrows pointing in opposite directions. You can click and drag it to shrink it in or stretch it open. And if it looks fuzzy, you're like, boy, I'm not sure what the original image size is like, but that's what I like because I don't want to stretch it so it's fuzzy or shrink it up so it looks blurry. Go ahead and double click on it. It opens up the property sheet, and then looking over here, we're looking at the size mode. The image is zooming to fit in the box. You can click on the drop down arrow. You can stretch it to fit the box. So now it's stretching in all directions, so more vertically, so that looks awful. Or click on the drop down arrow and do clip. That means, let me go ahead and close out, is that if I start stretching the box, it's going to start cutting off instead of compromising the quality or the original look of the image. So if I hover over that right middle handle till I can see my pointer turning into arrows pointing in opposite directions, and I click and drag, see how it's cutting it off? It's not having it zoom in to fit, so it looks kind of blurry, or stretching it out so far that it actually looks fuzzy. So then I can just leave it as clip and then kind of, well, resize it so that looks pretty good. Just as long as it doesn't cut it off right. And then since I have this extra space below, I can hover over the top, page header bar till my pointer turns into black arrows pointing up and down. Then I can click and drag that bar up. Everything comes up with it. And well, let me click and drag this over to the right here. I don't know, about right there. And then go to my report view to see what it looks like. Come up here, click on the view button for report, and hey, it looks pretty good, except it's got a white background. It's not transparent. Well, we can fix that. Let's go ahead and right click, go back to the design view. With it selected, come up here, click on the Format tab, go over to the Control Formatting group, click on the Shape Fill drop-down arrow, and let's do Transparent. Looks so much nicer. Okay, let's check it out. Right click, Report View. Yes, definitely a keeper. You saw how easy it was in the previous training video how to insert an image into the report. I inserted my logo here, thank you. And I want to show you here how you can easily insert a background image. First of all, what's a background image? Well, it's an image that you can insert into the center of your report that will print off on every page. But it involves some prep work on your part and prep work on mine. The prep work for you is to be able to, once you have the image, bleach it out or wash it out so it's not bold in color, because you can imagine when you insert that in the center of the report and you got data in front of it, how hard that might be to be able to read the data in front of something that's so bold in color. So go ahead and wash it out, bleach it out, also known as a watermark. Once you have that prepped, then my part is to show you how to clean up the report, so once you insert that image as a background, that you can actually see it. And what I mean by that is that first, we've got alternating colors here. If I don't turn those off and say no color, it's going to be cutting across that image, so we'll only see parts of the background image. Also, we have the text boxes that have a white background, and I need to make those transparent so we can see through and see the background image behind it as well. So to clean it up, let's go up here and right click and change to our design view. And before I do that really quick, up here, if you added a theme that has a color in one of your sections, like my report header, if you want to change that color, just go ahead and select the report header, the bar. When you select that, it actually means that you're selecting the entire section here. And then you want to come up here on the Design tab to the Tools group, click on the Property Sheet, or you can close out. You can just double click on that bar really fast. Brings up the Property Sheet, and it will show you here what you have selected, Report Header. Of course, if I click off, I can also come over here, click on the drop-down arrow, and find the Report Header. I mean, it's sorted alphabetically here, so down to the R's, Report Header, and it selects the bar. You may find it advantageous to use the Property Sheet to select your text boxes, labels, or other objects, as opposed to coming in here and clicking on it. I built some reports that were very heavy, that some of the labels were tiny, were crossing over, and I couldn't quite get to them. So instead I just came over here, clicked on the drop down arrow, alphabetically selected it, and was able to quickly make the format to that selection, like we're going to do here. We're on the Format tab, and I want to be able to change the back color from the current color, which it doesn't give the full name, just part of it. So if I click in it and then click on the Build button, you can see it's selected right there when I hover over it. The technical name, at least for access for this color, is Dark Blue Text 2 Lighter 80%. So I can come down here, select another color like white, and that's how you change it. It now added the web code for color, FFFFF. I don't like it. I'm going to go ahead and change it back by hitting the undo button. That's how you can go ahead and change colors that are applied to one section, like my report header. Okay, now let's go ahead and clean this report up so when we insert the image, we can actually see it. In fact, let me insert the background image right now so you know what I'm talking about. Let me go ahead and close out of the property sheet. To insert the background image, really simple. Come up here, click on the Format tab, click on the background image. If I already inserted this image before, it'll be there, but if not, you click on your Browse button. And again, by default, it's not going to show you all the files. It'll show you something like Web Ready, which when I'm looking in my exercises folder, I don't have anything of that file type. So I click on the drop-down arrow and choose All Files. Okay, there we go, I can see it. And there it is, Lavender. Now Lavender is the name of the essential oil. And my company, by the way, is an independent product consultant of essential oils. And so I've got this background image that I want to add to my report here, so I can double click on it. And notice after I double click on it, it's washed out, faded, it's like a watermark. Now let's see what it looks like when I right click. And I want to go to Print Preview because what I see in Print Preview is what's going to come out of my printer. When I click on it, wow, let me scroll down. You see how it's cut up, chopped up behind those alternating colors, and also the text box that have a white background, not a transparent. I've got some work to do. So I'm going to go ahead and right click in a blank area, go back to my design view, and let's clean this up. First thing we want to do is select our detail section and bring up the property sheet for it so I can click on it to select it. double click on it to bring up its corresponding properties for that detail section in the property sheet. And you see on the Format tab where it says Alternate Back Color, when I click in it and I click on the Build button, I want no color, okay? So that takes care of that part. Now the next part, let me go ahead and close out. You've got all these text boxes here that have a white background and that are not transparent like the labels. So I won't be able to see the image behind it till I make them transparent. So I want to go ahead and select all of them. And one way to select them, as you recall in an earlier training video, if I hover over to the left-hand side in the vertical ruler, you see how my pointer turns into a black arrow pointing to the right? If I click and hold down my left mouse button and drag, everything that crosses and that's in between those two lines, it'll select. So it selects all of these. Then I can bring up the property sheet by coming up here on the Design tab to the Tools group, click on Properties. We're on the Format tab. We want the back style, click in the back style corresponding field, click on the drop down arrow, and say we want it transparent. Right now it's normal. It's normal for the text boxes to have a white background, but we don't want to be normal. So we'll select transparent. And we might have selected a label or something that was already had a transparent background. That's why it didn't by default say normal, because if there's a mixture of two in the selection, it doesn't know what to say it is, so it just leaves it blank. You can double click really fast to toggle back and forth between the two. In any case, let me go ahead and close out of here, and let's right click and go to the print preview and see what it looks like. Oh, fabulous. Let's go to page 2. Okay, well, let me click on it to zoom out. The data ends up at the top of page 2, but it still prints my background image on every page. Click to zoom in. So you can see it's the essential oil lavender. Now for those of you who are curious about what essential oils are and want to learn more about them, basically an essential oil is a plant-derived oil that have been known, in this case lavender and a lot of others, to help with all sorts of human ailments. We have a store page that I can take you to that you can read up more about these oils and make sure that, like these oils, they're certified therapeutic grade. In other words, that the extraction process of these oils happen at the right time in the right season when the plants are in full bloom, but also done in the right method. Not using chemicals to extract it because, well, you can imagine how that could hurt the plant's compounds and not make them as effective as they could be or as potent. So if you're interested and you want to purchase some or read more about it, I'll try to hit two birds with one stone. Let me go ahead and create a hyperlink in my report. That way I can show you how to create a hyperlink in your report. And when you click on it, it'll take you right to my store page. So to get started, let's come up here and right click, go down to the design view, and I want to insert the hyperlink up here in the report header section. So I want to make sure that I click on that report header bar, okay? Then come up here on the Design tab to the Controls group, and there it is. Click on the Hyperlink button, opens it up, and then all you have to do is come down here in the address field and then type in the URL, the website address to my store page. Now when I do that, it's going to do two things. It'll actually add the URL up here in this section and provide a link that I can click on it. But if I don't want the URL to be displayed, but some other text, then type the text up here, and then the URL, that when they click on that text that's displaying, will take them to that web page. So up here, I'm going to type in the name that we go by as the independent product consultant for these certified pure therapeutic grade essential oils, and then our IPC number, again, independent product consultant. If you need that number when you're going through checkout to purchase some of the essential oils, that's 34814. And then down below the address to my web page, the store page, www. Then notice how I type it in. It automatically fills it in because that's what I typed in recently, so it remembers it. Otherwise, if not, just go ahead and keep typing the URL to whatever web page you want to link this to, and then click OK, and there it is. Doesn't look good right there, does it? So let me go ahead and hover over the border until I see the four-way arrow, click and drag that over, center it right there. And then, of course, when I right-click and go to Print Preview, and let me scroll to the top, the first page on the report, let me go to the second page. Again, it's the report header, or the heading of the entire report. Doesn't matter how many pages. Let me go ahead and right-click, go to the report view, because in this view, I can go ahead and hover over it, click on it, and it will open up the web page to my store. And there I am. Welcome, Kirk Kershaw Store. So you can go ahead and read more about these essential oils and see if they will be a match for you. And then if you need to get a hold of me, you can click on my name there, and it'll take you to a page, and you can go ahead and ask me some questions there. Now before you go ahead and print off your report, it's really a good idea that you look at it in Print Preview first, because if I come up here and I click Print, and I didn't go into Print Preview, even though it looks good in the report view, like it'll fit on a page, well, let me show you what happens. When I right click and go to Print Preview, What you see in here is what's going to come out of your printer. Whoa. Glad I looked at my print preview first. Let me go ahead and click to zoom out. So on page 1 of 1, so that's hacked. Let's go to page 2. It's cut. Page 3. Well, you see how it kind of bleeds over into the third page? We can go to page 4 as well. So if you get some blank pages or some text bleeding over into another, then it probably means you're exceeding the width of the page, or in this case, I over-exaggerated my margins. I made them 5 inches so I could give you an example to work with and how to straighten them up and try to fit everything onto one page. In any case, we're working with their margins. So to do that, I'm in Print Preview. You can come up here on the Print Preview tab, go to the Page Layout group, and click on Page Setup. And, well, that's ridiculous, right? 5 inches. So we can come in here and change that to 1/4 inch. And then having said that, if we needed to, we could probably even go to 0.15 and then click OK. And try to get our margins as tiny as possible so we can squeeze everything so you don't have text bleeding over from one page to another or some blank pages. In fact, if I want to view more than 2 pages at once, well, come up here in the Zoom group, click on More Pages. Let's go to 4. You can even click and go to 8 pages if you had more pages. In any case, you can see now that I don't have any blank pages or pages that have some text on it, but it couldn't fit it all there because I have my margins where it can fit everything onto one page. In fact, this left margin is pretty tight. I can actually increase it and push it out more towards the center by coming up here to the Page Setup, or let me close out. You can come over here to the Page Size group, click on the Margins drop-down arrow, and here's my last custom setting. I changed it back to 1/4 inch. It used to be 5 inches. That was ridiculous. In any case, that's narrow. We can make it wide, and if we make those margins wide, well, we're cutting down more trees. I hope you feel good about that. No, I'm just kidding. But it actually spreads it out here so it's more centered, and it looks nicer, even though it adds an extra page. Now, if you're really having issues with your margins, and you shrunk your margins, both top and bottom and left and right, to as small as you can get them, and you're still having issues, you may want to consider changing it from portrait to landscape. Click on landscape and see, wow, you got more room. But it's going to print obviously sideways instead of straight up and down, and that's how it's going to come out on those sheets of paper there. And then I can go ahead and click print, and when I'm finished, close out. As you recall in an earlier training video when we started creating our fields within our tables, I briefly went over the properties of some of the fields. For example, let me come up here and right-click on the tab, go to the Design View. Any field that I select up above will display its corresponding field properties down below. I want to cover now some more properties that will help you when it comes to controlling the data that's being entered into that field. So for example, let's say that the front-end user is entering in text in a text field and it's all lowercase, but you like it displayed in uppercase. You can go ahead and add a little code down below. In this case, I'm going to do it for the department field. Come down here into its corresponding format field and add the greater than symbol. Hit the Tab key. Let's go ahead and click on the View button. Be sure to save your work. Click Yes. Come over here to the department and let's type in a lowercase letter. Hit the Tab key and there we go. It displays it in uppercase. Doesn't convert it because when I go back into it, click inside it, it displays it as it was originally entered, lowercase r. And if I want to go ahead and change it, use the Shift key, and then when you're done, just go ahead and click in a record below to save it. Another example is that when it comes to creating these fields, I have them named the way I'd like to see them, but then again, I'm not going to be the front-end user. So if I have a front-end user that doesn't understand what DEPT is, and they're annoyed with that, I can please us both by coming up here and right-clicking on the tab, going down to the Design View, keep my naming convention here, shortened to the point, but for them, select the field that they don't like the name as currently displayed in the datasheet view, then come down here in its field properties in the caption cell and type in whatever you'd like to be displayed in the datasheet view form. I mean, some people have to have it spelled out. There it is, department. Hit the Tab key. Before I go ahead and switch views and show you that it really does work, I want to go over one more field property here, the allow zero length. Now some database designers will use this. You can be creative and probably get by without it, but in any case, allow zero length, the definition of it is that right now the default's no, but when it's turned to yes, it allows a string that contains no characters. How does that work? Well, if you type in a pair of quotes with no space in between it, that's a string that contains no characters. Let me see if I can come up with a good example of why you may want to use this. Some database designers use this to indicate that the data entry knows the no value that exists for that field. Instead of just skipping over the field, they just type in an open and close quotes. Because if they skip over it, it'll enter in a null or empty value. At least this way, when we set this to yes, it allow that double quotes with no space in between them or zero length string to be added to this field. You won't be able to see it after you type in the open close quotes with no space, but it'll be there. So that way, when you're doing queries and you want to enter in some criteria that says, okay, find me all the fields that have a zero-length string, type it in, it pulls it up, as opposed to those fields that they just skipped over, that they didn't enter anything in it. So for this example, the department, maybe we just typed in a zero-length string, indicating that the employee doesn't belong to a department that we did check, as opposed to leaving it blank and some other data entry coming in here and going, we still need to find out. I mean, like I said, you can use this, or you can be creative and just say, look, type in the text, no department. In any case, let's go ahead and test it. I'm going to leave it as no, so I can show you that it won't allow that unless you set it to yes. Come up here, click on the View button, save our work, yes. And then before you do that, remember we had our DEPT for department. Well, when I hover over to the right of it, till my pointer turns into arrows pointing in opposite directions, double click really fast or click and drag. Well, there we go. The front-end user now gets what they want without me having to compromise on the way I like it named in the design view. Okay, zero-length string, which is for department. If I come in here, delete that, and right now it doesn't allow it, so if I do open and close quotes, no space, so there's zero length, hold down the Shift key and hit Enter, it says you cannot add a zero-length string. Click OK, hit the Escape key to not save it, go back to the design view, and then you can come over here and click on the drop-down arrow and select yes, but to me that's too slow. Double-click, goes to no, double-click, goes to yes. Okay. So if I go ahead and switch views now and enter an open and close quotes, it'll allow the zero-length string. In fact, there's a little bit more to it if you want to read up on it. Just click in this field, hit the F1 key on the keyboard, opens up the help for that, and again, it talks about it here, and it says if you want Microsoft Access to store a zero-length string instead of an empty or null value, when you leave a blank field, then it gives you the requirements, the least of which is to allow a zero-length string by changing it to yes. In fact, you can come up here and click on the plus sign, and there's the definition of a zero-length string. Okay, close out, set it to yes, click on the View button, click yes to save it, come over here, type in open close quotes, Shift Enter, there's no space. I didn't get an error, it saved it to allow that zero-length string. And it's not going to display the quotes, it's just going to be stored there. I'm going to go ahead and type in TR because I'd rather have them tied to the training department, Shift Enter. When it comes to entering in a new employee, the new employee typically works 40 hours a week, okay? So if I come up here and select on the hours field, the default value is 0. Well, what's the point in having an employee if they don't work at all? So I'm going to change the default to 40. Hit the Tab key. That way, if I'm typing in a lot of records, we've hired a lot of new employees, that's one less thing I have to enter in. Speed up my data entry. Let's do another one. Let's look at pay rate. Now for the pay rate, I want to be able to restrict this cell to less than $30 an hour. First select it down below in its corresponding field properties, click in the validation rule, and type in less than, the less than symbol, and then the number that it needs to be less than, then hit the Tab key. So when somebody enters in a new record and tries to type in 30 or more, it's not going to save it. In fact, it would be nice to give them some sort of validation text so we can go ahead and type in. Now remember, if we want it to be equal to or less than, when it comes to equaling, it has to be to the right of the less than or greater than symbol. Can't be to the left, otherwise you're going to get errors, always to the right. I'm going to double click and change that to yes. Enter something in that field. Okay, let's go ahead and take it for a test drive. Come up here, click on the View button. Be sure to save your work. I have some employees that are making more than $30 an hour, so it doesn't really go with that validation rule there, less than 30. We'll go ahead and click yes, we'll continue. I know it violates, click yes, keep going. And you can see the pay rates here, greater than 30. But if I come down here, click on the new record button, and I start down here, employee 1-35, notice how the default value is 40, not 0. We set that, remember, for the hours field, so wow, I don't have to waste time there, I can just tab over it. And then the pay rate, if I hold down the Shift key and hit Enter, it saves it because it's not blank, it's paying $0. But if I delete it, and it didn't have the default 0 there, and I held down the Shift key and hit Enter, then it says, okay, you got to enter in a value, even if it's 0. Okay, that doesn't work. I mean, nobody's going to work for 0. But what if we try to enter in something like equal to or greater than 30? Hold down the Shift key and hit Enter. There's our validation text that comes up. It says, must enter a value under 30. Okay, I get it. So let's go ahead and type in $29, hit the Tab key, and, type in the rest here. And then when we're done, Shift Enter to save it. Now, on that same note, when it comes to entering in my employee ID, the first couple letters have to always be EE. I can go ahead and set up a validation rule for this cell that says, okay, the first couple letters always has to be EE. Go ahead and right-click. Let's go to our design view for the employee ID field. come down here into its corresponding field property for the validation rule. You can see over here that limits the values that can be entered into this field, and it's going to be EE asterisk. The asterisk is the wild card. That means anything. So EE, and then anything that comes after it doesn't matter. The first two characters have to be EE. When I hit the tab key upon exit, Access comes in, cleans it up for me, says, okay, you have to write it like this, like, then put the quotes around it. Like I said, if it's going to do it for me, I'm not eager to go ahead and remember that and keep typing it in. And then of course some validation text, so when somebody forgets to type in the first couple letters EE, that this is what they'll see. Okay, let me go ahead and right click on that to zoom in so you can see everything that I typed. Employee ID must begin with, not EEK, EE, followed by 1. Then a dash, then additional digits. I mean, I could have just left it as the employee ID must begin with EE, but I wanted to give them a little bit more. Go ahead and click OK. Let's go ahead and save it. Again, we're changing the rules on a field that Access was already used to set one way. Let's go ahead and say yes, we want to process the new rules. Click on the View button. Come down here, let's enter in our first record, and let's say it's EK. Shift Enter to save it. And there we go. Employee ID must begin with E, followed by 1, then a dash. I mean, if we start to enter this record off for the first time, then we want to pay attention to it. But I can see from the examples up above that, I guess it better be EE. And then go ahead and type in the rest of the data. Shift Enter to save it, and we're good to go. If you want to be able to keep track of changes made to a field, in other words the history of it, which by the way it only works on fields who have the data type Memo assigned to it or applied to it. For example, I've got my comments field, it has the Memo data type, and once I turn this feature on, any changes that are made, it'll keep track of. Well, not right now because I didn't turn it on yet, so these changes or updates that were made here, not part of the history. So it's a good idea to turn it on if you want to keep track of all the changes before you start entering in your records. Let me show you. Come up here, right click on the tab, go to the design view, and again this only applies to the Memo data type, so come down here and select the field that has that data type. Down below it'll have its corresponding field properties. Memo again is the only one when I scroll down to the bottom that has the append only. When I click in it, it'll describe that field, or in this case ask us, would you like to collect history on this field? Set to no. If I'd like to set it to yes, double click and let's go ahead and change the view. Be sure to save our work, click yes, and then let's go ahead and make some changes. Come up here and let's change this, delete it and say it's 2008, Shift Enter, and then later on when I come in here and I'm like, wait a second, I thought it was 2007, I want to see the history of this. Go ahead and right click, and there it is, Show Column History. Now it only shows the change that I just made, not what it was before because I didn't turn it on until just now. So again, you want to turn it on before you start entering in records if you want to keep a history of everything from scratch. Let's click OK. Now if I come up in here and I make another change, last raise, let's just change it up a bit, say is 2010, Shift Enter, right click, Show Column History, there we go. Doesn't show us the first one because we didn't turn it on prior to it being entered, but it shows us the second and the third entry there. If I come back up here and I right click, go to the design view and I double click to turn it off, and then I click Save, it's not going to keep a history of those changes made in that field, the comments. Go ahead and say yes, it's all gone. So when I come back to the datasheet view and I right click, I get no option for looking at the history. Now as a side note, I thought I'd show you something cool that you might find helpful. Speaking of keeping track of changes or being able to quickly distinguish between changes, for example, when I'm looking at the health field here to see which employees have health and which employees don't, I'm looking for a check in the box. Now that stands out a little bit, but if I use color, a little bit of conditional formatting, like if they have health insurance with the company, put it in blue. If they don't, put it in red, flag it so I can go ahead and talk to them and say, hey, you may want to consider purchasing health insurance. Well, the tables are limited and forms. They're more flexible when it comes to applying conditional formatting, but if you're just going to use the table, let me show you how you can do it here. Just a little bit of coding, okay? So I'm going to come up here, right click on the tab, go to the design view, and then again it's for the data type yes, no, and the format is a yes, no. Now what I'm going to do here instead is I'm going to change this format. If they need it, I want to display it in red. If they already have it, I'll just say got it and display the text in blue. So come down here, delete it, and let's type it in. Open quotes, needs it, or need it, and then open square bracket, the color of the text, need it, in red, and then semicolon, so you can go ahead and go to the next one and say open quotes, got it, close quotes, and then the color of got it is going to be blue in square brackets, okay? So the value that it's looking at is that if they don't have it, they have an empty value, the box isn't checked, then they'll need it. If they already have it and the box is checked, it'll be in blue. But actually, we can't use a checkbox if we want to format it this way. So how do we change it from a checkbox to an actual just plain text box so it can display the text there? I mean, this is text. You can't check the text. It's not a box, right? So we have to go to the Lookup tab and then go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow, change it to a text box. Okay, back to our general. Okay, need it, got it. Let's click on the View button. We got to save it, say yes, and there we go. So instead of checkboxes for those who have it, I just said got it. And then the color stands out, pops out. Instead of me looking with those tiny checkboxes, those that are checked, those that aren't, the red really calls my attention. And of course, if you don't like that anymore, then right click, go to the design view, click on the drop down arrow, go back to your yes, no, go to the Lookup tab and say it's no longer a text box, it's back to our checkbox, switch views, say yes, you want to save it, and you're back to where we started. Another way that we can help the front-end user when it comes to inputting data into a field is by inserting an input mask, well, where applicable. What is an input mask? Well, we saw it in an earlier training video. As you recall, when we came down here, we clicked in the phone field, and we just started typing in the number, how it brought up the parentheses. And then as we continued typing, the underscore or the line beneath it would disappear as we entered in the numbers. Well, that's an input mask. The definition of it is that it's a pattern for all data to be entered into, well, in this case, the phone field, where we want the 3-digit area code and then the rest of the phone number. If we didn't have that, and the user couldn't look up above to find any records, and they were starting from scratch, how would they know to enter in the area code or if that's what's required for the phone without that input mask there, those symbols? Let me go ahead and hit the escape key so I don't save this, and let's go ahead and set up the input mask for this field, the phone. Come up here, right click on the tab, go to the design view, come down here and select the phone field, and then down below it'll display its corresponding field properties. Click in its input mask cell, come over to the right and click its build button. When you click on it, well, there's nothing to build because it's already there. But we can go ahead and customize it. In other words, by default, this is what the data is going to look like. And you can try it. Come down here, click in it, and then just start typing. See how the underscore, let me finish that, how it had the underscore or underline, it disappeared when I continued typing until it was completely gone. So it told the front-end user that's all we need for this, and that's what we're looking for, the area code and the 7-digit number after it. Well, you can click Finish and that would be that, or you can customize it by clicking Next and saying, okay, I can change the coding up at the top, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. But like, for example, the exclamation point there allows the mask to be filled in from left to right, as opposed to right to left. And then the placeholder character is the underscore. I can change that to the pound symbol. And let's go ahead and come down here and try it. Now if I click down here in the field, it's just like if the front-end user was using the mouse and clicked in the phone number field, wherever you click is where you're going to end up. And then it makes it challenging to go, oops, I need to come back over here. Instead, let me come back up here in the previous field, use the tab key to get to that next field, and then I can just go ahead and start typing. Ooh, the pound symbols, they look fancy. Let's go ahead and click Next. And then finally it says, how do you want to store your data? With symbols in the mask or without it? Now I found that when it comes to using the mask the wizard has, and it lists a few of them that you can choose from, that it will store it with the symbol even if you choose without it. And I'll show you that in just a second. But when you create a custom template, custom mask, I find that these actually live up to what they say. In other words, if I create a custom one for my employee ID, and I'll show you that in just a minute, if I choose without the symbols, the mask will pull up with the symbols there, but upon exit of that field and I continue typing in the rest of the fields, it'll display it like this and store it like that if I choose this option, okay? So in other words, custom templates you create, this actually works. If you just use the default templates that we just saw, phone being one of them, it'll actually, even though if I select this, still display and store the symbols in the mask. So to show you that, I'll go ahead and say, don't store the symbols. Click Next, click Finish. So we know that the phone is not storing the symbols. Let's go ahead and do a custom one, the employee ID. Select it, come down here into its corresponding field properties, click on the input mask cell. Over to the right, click its build button. It's asking us to save it before we proceed. We'll say yes. Now, it's got a bunch of templates here. Employee ID wasn't originally one of them. Because I did that earlier on before I created this training video, it's stuck. In other words, there's no delete key. Access assumes that you can recycle, so if you want to use this for something else and rename it, then you can do that. In fact, you can go ahead and scroll down and see everything else that's available. Those are the default templates. the employee ID is the only one that I created from scratch. And let me show you how you do it. So let's pretend that it's not there. Just go ahead and click on the Edit button. When you click Edit, it'll have one of 4 records. Well, there's number 5 here because when I click at the end, keep going through to number 5, this is the one that I created. How did I create it? Well, I clicked on the new blank record and then I typed it in. Let me go back and show you what I did here. I typed in the name of the field, the description, employee ID, and then the input mask. I entered in some coding. For example, as you recall, the exclamation point there allows the mask to be filled in from left to right. Then the 2 capital L's are for entering in a single letter per L. And then zeros for single digits, those are required. If you don't have one in there in any part of your mask, it won't work. Now if you want to see if there are other codes that you can use for the input mask, just go ahead and while you're in there, that field input mask, hit the F1 key to bring up the help window. Let me go ahead and maximize it. And then type in up here, input mask. Now before I click the search button, by default it's going to search my computer, and I found that it doesn't pull up anything useful. So I'll go ahead and change the search by clicking on its drop down arrow and say that I want to search all of Access online from office.com and not just from this computer. You can see the default, the help on this computer. Choose all Access, so it's going to view all of Access online, and then go ahead and click the search button for the input mask. And there it is, Control Data Entry Formats with Input Mask. Click on it, brings up the page, scroll down, and there we go, the character and the explanation of it. So like 0, user must enter in a digit, 0 to 9, you can use 9 here. The L, user must enter in a letter, and then of course the exclamation point causes the input mask to fill form from left to right instead of from right to left. In any case, let me go ahead and close out. Down here the placeholder, as we just saw when we created our input mask for the phone field, instead of the underscore we replaced it with the pound symbol. You can type in whatever character you want there. And then down here it's going to have some sample data. It doesn't matter, it just has to be a sample. Because when I enter in my record it's EE, but I put an EN. In other words, the 2 characters here have to be a letter, followed by, well, there's 0, a number, and then the dash is part of it, so it just goes over it, and then I can type in the other 2 numbers. Again, notice there's no delete button here, so if I'm done using this, then I just leave it. I just don't use it in any of my tables. But if I want to go ahead and create something else, instead of creating more and more, just go ahead and overwrite this, update it with, well, another input mask that you want to set up. Going to go ahead and close out, list it here, select it. I could click Finish and be done with it, or I could go back through, click Next, and say, well, I didn't really want the underscore, let me change that. Click Next. And then it says, of course, do you want to store this with the symbols or without? If I choose without, because this is a custom one, it'll have the symbols there when I start typing, but upon exit of that field, it will look like this, unless I choose Store with the symbols. Let me show you. We'll go ahead and click Next, click Finish. Both the phone and the employee ID fields are storing the data without the symbols. So let's go ahead and click on View. Be sure to save your work. Come down here and click in it. Go, well, click to the left here. And then type in EE1, and there's the mask. Looks fancy. And then upon exit, when I hit the Tab key, it stores it without the symbols there. Okay. Now when I come over to the phone field and I start typing in, and then I hit the Tab key, it stores it. What's the difference? This was the template that was already available, where this is something that I created from scratch. So hit the Escape key a couple of times, come back up here, click on the Design button. I can come back here and update this for the employee ID. Make sure that I have it selected up above so I can see it displayed down below. And then click on its Build button. And then be sure to select it again. Click Next, Next. We'll do it with symbols. Click Finish. You can see the code right there. Go ahead and click the View button. Be sure to save your work. Let's go ahead and type it in. EE135 tab. Upon exit, there we go. It actually stores it. Another way that I like to help out my front-end user when it comes to entering in data is to shorten their work. For example, I allow them to enter in the department code, not the full name for the department. That's fine and dandy until I get a new employee who doesn't understand what TR is. So what I can do to help that person out is I can convert this field into a lookup field, where if they don't understand the code or they don't have it memorized, they can click on a little drop-down arrow here when they click in this field, and it will open up into a combo box-like format where it will display all the codes over on the left-hand side and their corresponding full names to the right for each code. So I want to be able to look this department up, the code, in the departments table. When I double-click, there's the code, and it will bring back the full name. So we can say, okay, this one's in the accounting department. Oh, there's the code AC. Now I know what it means. Now I want you to know before I proceed with this is that these two tables are not related. As you recall, up here on the Database Tools tab, click on Relationships. There's the two relationships one-to-one, but Departments isn't linked up or hooked up to the Department table yet. Now I could go ahead and do it now, but I want to show you what it looks like when I try to connect with another table that isn't related. And it will give me that option to go ahead and create that relationship when I'm doing a lookup wizard. Because I'm saying go ahead and with the fields that are already listed in the payroll table, look it up in this table, okay? And to do that, they have to be linked. So let me go ahead and close out. Close out of the departments table, and let's right click and go to the design view. Okay, we're looking at the department field. We're changing the data type from a simple text to, click on the drop down arrow, wait for it, lookup wizard. Go ahead and click on it. It opens it up and it says, okay, how do you want your lookup fields to get its values? You can either type it in or you can look it up in another table, but remember my tables are not related, but it's got a fix for it and I'll show you that. I recommend that you actually fix it before you do this. So if I go ahead and select I want to type in the values that I want, and I click next, and I come in here and I say okay, it's going to be accounting. When I start typing in the values, the problem with that is that when I select the accounting there, when it gives me the drop down list and it has accounting, it will replace the code AC with accounting, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and click back and say I want to look it up in another table which has both the code and its full name, and I want to display both of those, not in the field, just display it when they look it up so they can compare the code with the full name, and then choose the code, and only the code will display. So we'll click next. The departments table is the table that's going to provide the values that I want. Click next, and then it says select the fields that you like displayed in that combo box or lookup. I want both. I want to see the code and its corresponding name. Click next. And you want to sort these in the list box. Well, in this case it's also known as the combo box. Let's go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and say we want to see it sorted by department code ascending A to Z. Click on it, or descending Z to A. Let's go back to ascending. Click next. And it says how would you like the columns in your lookup field? In other words, when I click on that drop down arrow, do I just want to see the name? No, I also want to see its corresponding code. How do I see it? Well, right now it's being hidden. It says, look, we recommend that you hide the key column. In other words, when I uncheck it, this is the field that has the primary key assigned to it. But when I click on the drop down arrow, I want to see the code and its name. So when I'm thinking, okay, this person belongs in the administration department, let me click on the drop down arrow. Well, I can see administration. What's the code? AD. And I can start memorizing them. So I don't have to click on the drop down arrow. I can just type in AD if they belong in the administration department. Okay. Now, if the fields in here are a little bit longer than the column, then hover over the upper right-hand side of that column next to the column name until your pointer turns into arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then double-click really fast, or of course you can click and drag. Double-click to do a best fit, double-click. Okay. Click Next. And then it says, when you select a row in the lookup field, you can store a value from that row in your database, or you can use that value later to perform an action. So it says, choose a field that uniquely identifies the row. Well, between these two, which one has the primary key? Because the primary key is going to be unique, right? Well, it's the department code. So I would say almost all the time, if not all the time, choose the field that has the primary key, and then click Next. And then it says, what label would you like for your lookup field? It's going to be department code. Now down here it displays this because, again, my tables weren't related. So it says, do you want to enable data integrity between these tables? It's going to create a link between those two tables. But as you recall in our relationships training video, unless we go ahead and enable data integrity, what I do in one won't update and relate to the other. So I can make changes in one and it won't update the corresponding table or related table, which could give us data integrity issues. So if I check it, then I can go ahead and say, okay, let's also allow for deletions. So what I delete in one table will delete its corresponding record in the other table. So if I delete a department, it will delete everything that it's tied to in the payroll table. Now if I uncheck it, it gives me the other option. It says, do you want to store multiple values for this lookup field? So I can go ahead and select that this employee belongs to two or more departments, which wouldn't make sense. So I may want to go ahead and enable the data integrity and allow for deletions, and then go ahead and click Finish. And then it says, okay, be sure to save before this relationship can be created. So when I click Yes, is the relationship created? I don't know. Let's go take a look. Click on the Database Tools. Click on Relationships. Well, there it is. One department to, well, many employees. In other words, you can have more than one employee belong to one department. So there's where it becomes a one-to-many relationship. Okay. Let me go ahead and close out. Let's go ahead and switch views. Click on the View button. come over here and I'm like, okay, I'm entering in a new employee. Well, I could come down here and click in it, click on the drop down arrow, and let's see, they belong to the marketing. So that's helpful because before, what's the code for marketing? Well, there it is, marketing, and then there's the code, MK. So I can go ahead and select this line item and it enters in the code. Really nice. Let me hit the escape key so it doesn't save the record. And I can also come in here, click in that field, and it displays it as well. Now we can customize this a bit more. In other words, I can add headings for both columns here. So this says the code and that says the department name. Let me go ahead and hit the escape key, come up here, switch views to design view. Make sure that you have the field selected. Now notice how it says the data type is still text. I know it says that, but we changed it to lookup. Why doesn't it say lookup? Well, that's something that Access has chosen to go ahead and display that there, but it is a lookup field. How do I know? We'll come down here and click on the lookup tab, and there it is. It's a combo box display control. If it was just a regular text field, then let me click in here, click on the drop down arrow, it would say text, okay? Let me hit the escape key so I don't make any changes there. So even though it says text field, if you're really curious to find out if it really is a text field and not a lookup field, then come here and click on the lookup tab. It is a lookup field, it's a combo box, and wow, there's the code. You can see here where it says column heads is no, double click and change it to yes, so you can see the headings for each of the columns. And then the column width, as you recall, the first column there, the code, was about yay big. Well, it's about a little bit more than a half an inch. And this is, well, 3/4 of an inch. If you want to go ahead and increase that and come in here, let's do 1 inch. Hit the tab key to make sure it's okay with it. And let's go take it for a test drive. Come up here, click on the view button. Be sure to save it. Say yes. And then it gives me a warning that things have changed since the last time I opened it, either by another user or because another instance of it was opened on my machine. Do you want to replace the changes that you or another user made? I'll say yes. Let's go ahead and click in the field, click in the drop down arrow. There it is, department code. There's the column headings. And then I open this up more. It doesn't actually expand it. It just gives me the scroll so I can go over and I can see the rest of it. So that field is about 1 inch long. Okay. Otherwise, it did give me the scroll, as you recall, before I changed it and made this from about, well, 0.8 of an inch to 1 inch. And then, of course, if you don't want the code column showing, you can come back here to the design view. Again, select the field and its corresponding field property. The lookup tab here is where we're going. And then we've got the column width, which is at just over a ½ inch. I could type in 0 so the code doesn't show, and then go ahead and click on the view button, say yes. So when I click on the drop down arrow, you can see the code is now not showing. We're just looking it up by full name here. When I hit the escape key, if I type in SL and hit the tab key, it no longer works. Hit the escape key a couple of times so I don't make any changes there, which defeats the purpose for me having them enter in the code here. So nonetheless, I want to show you in case if you want to make some changes there just on the fly, and we'll go back to about 0.6 inches. Click view, save. There we go. We're back to where we started. As you recall in the Access Level 1 training video, we created our relationships between our tables by coming up here, clicking on the Database Tools tab, and opening up the relationship window. The only other place that you can create a relationship outside of that window is within a query, but it's known as a join, and it's temporary, not permanent. So for example, I've got my two tables here, Book Project, which keeps track of all the books that we've manufactured, and my Book Sales table keeps track of all the manufactured books that we've sold. And down below in the grid, I've added 2 fields from the Book Project table and these 2 from the Book Sales. You can see I don't have a relationship between the 2 tables, so what I can do is I can create a temporary one or a join. If I don't create one here and I try to view the data, it'll give me bogus results. For example, Book Project and Book Sales. How many records do I have in my Book Project table? A total of 25. How many in my Book Sales? 82. So between the 2, a total of 107. When I go back to my query, without that join, when I go ahead and run it, come up here, click on the Design tab again, go back to Run. How many records do I have? Wow, 2050. There's the first red flag. The second is over here with the order ID. This field is a unique field. It's got the primary key assigned to it, so it should not be duplicating 11111. Come back up here to the Book Sales table. You can see the example here. That's unique to this transaction, 2 is unique to that transaction, 3, and so on. So back to my query, the reason why it's doing this again is because without a relationship, or in this case a join, Access doesn't know which records are associated with which. So what it does as a solution, it combines every record in one table with every record in the second table. And that's not going to work for us, so let's go ahead and right click and go to the design view and create that join. Now in order to create a relationship, as we learned in Access Level 1, we're going to have the field in one table, the primary key, linked to the foreign key field in another table. And you can see I've got part number here that I'm going to join up to the part number field over in the book sales. Now again, they don't have to have the exact same name. I like to keep them similar or having the exact same name so I know what I'm linking up to. But they do have to have the same data type. So for example, right click on the book project table, go to design. The primary key field here, the part number, has the data type text. And then right click the book sales, go to design. And it better have the same data type for that foreign key field in this table, and it does, text. So back to my query, I can just go ahead and click and drag and hover over the part number as I'm dragging this part number over to that one and let go, and it creates the join. It doesn't bring up the window that says, okay, do you want to enforce referential integrity? Because again, this is temporary, only being applied to this query. Now there are two different types of joins. There's an inner join and an outer join. To learn more about this, you can go ahead and right click on that line between the two and click on join properties. And you got a total of 3, but there are two different types. The first one is an inner join. The last two are outer joins. Now I don't know why Access doesn't call it an inner join and these two outer joins, but in any case, see if this makes sense. The first one, an inner join, only include rows where the joined fields from both tables are equal. So if I click and drag this down, only include those records from both tables where these joined fields are equal or matching. Let me see if I can explain this graphically by opening up my PowerPoint presentation. So I've got two tables here, and the inner join only wants to pull in those records where those two fields are matching. So it doesn't pull in necessarily all of table A or all of table B, just where it matches between those two joined fields. And then the other type is an outer join. And as you recall, we had an outer join 2 and 3. Well, 2 means that you can pull in all records from one table and only those that match in between the linked fields, or you can do it from all of table B and where it only relates between those two fields or match in table A. So let me go back to my database here, and there we go. Include all records from the book project table, or include all records from the book sales table, and then of course after, only those records from the other table where the joined fields are equal. So let me go back to number 1, click OK, and show it to you. Let's click on the View button. Whoops, it doesn't like it when I have other tables opened that this query is based upon, so we'll go ahead and right click on those tables and close out, okay? And then go ahead and click on the View button, and there we go. Have a total of 82 records. I mean, coincidentally, it's the same number that we had in our book sales table here. It doesn't mean that every book that we produced or manufactured in the book project table is being sold. So for example, we've got the book title here with different order IDs. That's been sold quite a bit. So again, only where those two fields are matching. So we have the part number, the book that we manufactured in the book project table, and in the book sales table, it's actually been entered here, so it's matching, so that's why it's pulling. So let's go back to the design view and change this with the right click, join properties. Let's go to include all the records in the book project table and only those records where the joined fields are equal. Click OK. Let's go ahead and click on the Run button, and there we go. It included every single book, even those that haven't been sold yet, and you can tell because we don't have an order ID for some of these books, including the amount sold. So we haven't sold working from your home using your computer. I guess that's not popular. Let me go back to my design view. Go ahead and right click it, open up the properties, and you can select number 3, click OK, and you can see that it's pointing in the other direction, the arrow, meaning include everything here, and then only those that match over here where it's pointing to. Click on the Run button. How many records? Total of 82. I mean, when it's including everything in the sales and matching only those records in the project, it's not going to pull in those that haven't been sold, so we're back here to 82. Okay, one last example I want to show you. Let me go ahead and close out of here and be sure to save my work. Is let me go ahead and double click and open up the customer's name. Now if you get this error, the query must have at least one destination field. It means that whoever designed this query, let me go ahead and click OK, and right click and open up in Design View, added the tables but didn't add the fields from the table down below to be viewable in the datasheet view. So if there's nothing viewable and you double click to open it up in datasheet view, it's going to go, what do you want to see, because I don't have anything down there in the grid. Let me go ahead and click and drag the split bar down, and you can see the two tables. Let me click and drag the bottom of the tables to stretch them open. Now if you have two tables that aren't related, and you know that if they're not related, that when we go ahead and pull the fields down below and try to view it, we get erroneous results. So one way, as we just learned, was to go ahead and click and drag part number to part number, but this one doesn't have a foreign key field in that table. Well, there might be another table out there that relates to this table and that table, a codependent as it were between mother and father, that can actually link them up through that table, because remember, these tables don't have to be directly related. They can be indirectly through another table. So if I go ahead and I right click here and I come down to show tables, and let's double click on the book sales table. There we go, close out, and the book sales table relates to the book project and the also relates to the customer. And through that, we're able to go ahead and pull up the fields we want from the book project and the customer. We don't have to include the book sales. We just need the book sales there to be able to communicate and see the relation between the two tables so we don't get erroneous results. So let's see, we can add the book title from the book project table and the customer name from the customer table. Again, we're going part number to part number, and then it looks like customer ID to customer ID. Let's go ahead and click on the Run button. It pulls it in. We don't get erroneous results. We got a total of 82 records. Now, if you haven't watched the previous training video on joins, you want to watch it so you can get a better idea of what I'm going to be covering here. But really quick, a join is a temporary relationship that we can create within a query. And so a self-join is what I'm going to be doing here, is joining a table unto itself. Now I can only create a relationship, which sounds odd, with a table unto itself if that table contains two fields where it has duplicate data in those fields but in different records. For example, I've got my supervisors table and I've got two fields, the first field and the last field, that contain duplicate data but in different records. Well, let's look at one of the employees. We have Paul Heffernan. His employee ID is E18. For the supervisor ID, I just use the employee ID. So you can see where we can get duplicate data but in different records. So his supervisor, if I look up this employee ID, which is EE01, is going to be Max Klinger. So instead of coming in here and going, okay, who's the supervisor? Let me look up the employee. I can go ahead and create a query that will say we'll list all the employees' names in one column and then all their corresponding managers in another. So I can just go straight across and not have to zigzag around to find the employee's supervisor by looking at the employee ID here and looking it up over in this column over here. So let me go ahead and open up my supervisors query that I just started. All I did here was add the supervisors table here. And to join this table unto itself, so I can go ahead and relate the ID in one table unto the supervisor ID in the other, is to go ahead and duplicate that table. How do I do it? Well, to show your tables, as you recall, you can do it one of two ways. Come up here, click on the Design tab. In the Query Setup, click on Show Table, close out, or right-click up here in a blank area, and then go down to Show Table. And there it is, Supervisors, double-click, close out, and you can see this is the first copy of the original here. Let me go ahead and hover over the bottom and expand it. And so that's how I'm going to go ahead and relate it unto itself. Now to do that, to relate ID unto supervisor ID or supervisor ID unto ID, it doesn't matter which way you link it, you just have to do a little bit of cleaning up. And what I mean by that is that it's a little bit confusing when you have supervisors here and supervisors there. We can go ahead and give them alias names. This could be the employees and that could be the managers, and we'll do that in just a second. But before I go ahead and link one ID to the other, or from that ID to the other one in the second table, remember that these relationships or joins have to have fields that have the same data type. Let's go ahead and check it in the supervisors table by right-clicking, going to the design view, and the ID has the data type text, and the supervisor ID has the same data type text. So we're good to go. Let's go back to the query here, and I'm going to go ahead and click and drag supervisor ID from the supervisors table over onto the ID in the supervisors one and let go. It creates a temporary join, and as you recall in the previous training video, it's an inner join. So only those fields that match, that have the exact same data, will be pulled in. And again, you want to watch the previous training video if you don't know what an inner join is. Now to help avoid confusion, I want to go ahead and rename these tables here, give them alias names. So for example, the supervisors table, I'll name employees. So I'll go ahead and right-click on that title there and go to Properties. Come over here in the Property sheet, and let's go ahead and type over the alias that's currently table of supervisors to employees and hit the Tab key. After I hit the Tab key, there it goes. It changes from supervisors to employees. This one I want to go ahead and rename the alias from supervisors 1 to managers, then hit the Tab key. Then I'll go ahead and close out. So far so good. So all I need to do now is to go ahead and add, well, the first and last name for the employees down below, and then the corresponding related record that it's joined to, their manager's first and last name. So let's go ahead and double click first, last, double click first and last. And let's go ahead and take it for a test drive. Before I go ahead and click the view button, remember queries, when you try to view them or run them, they don't like it when the table that it's based upon, or tables, is open. So let me go ahead and right click and close out of that table, then click on the view button, and let's see if it works. Let's go ahead and hover over up in between those two columns until my pointer turns into black arrows pointing in opposite directions, then click and drag or double click really fast and double click, and it works out great. We've got the list of the manager max cleaner for all these employees here. And then Bob, he's only the manager over one employee, and then the manager over these employees, and so on. Looks great. A couple of things before we close out. Let me go ahead and right click and go back to the design view. If you don't like the caption manager's name for the first and last, go ahead and select one of these fields and then right click and go to the properties, and then come up here for the last name for the caption, and go ahead and say, okay, I don't want to see managers.last. Let's go ahead and just say last M. I mean, whatever you want to go ahead and put and replace. Then hit the tab key, go ahead and click on the view button, and there it is, last M, last name for managers. Let me go ahead and right click and go back to the design view and close out of here. Now you may be wondering why I went from supervisor ID to the ID in the managers as opposed to, let me go ahead and select it, hit the delete key, from ID here to the supervisor ID there, because when I do it that way and I click on the view button, then I'll have to change things around because now it lists the manager as the employee and the employee as the manager, which is not correct. So back to my design view, I would go ahead and rename this the managers and then that the employees for it to be correct. But instead of doing that, I'll just go ahead and select it and go from supervisor ID in the employees table to the ID in the managers. And then when I click on the view button, it sorts it out as it should, where we've got the manager here for each employee over there. The top values query allows you to select the top 5 or conversely the bottom 5 values of a numerical field. For example, I've got my book sales query here and I want to design it where I can find the top 5 customers who we sold the most books to. So to do that, up here in my tables, I'll go ahead and add the customer name by double-clicking on it down to the grid below, and then double-click and add my numerical field books sold. So here I can go ahead and find the top 5 customers who we sold the most books to. So without applying this feature, the top values query, which I'll show you in just a second, if I just go ahead and click on the Run button, the problem I run into here is that it'll list the customer name more than once if they made more than one order. For example, Star Temps is listed 3 times. They have 3 different order IDs. So let's go ahead and right click, go back to the design view so I can show you, double click and add the order ID down below, then click on the Run button and you can see for yourself. So Star Temps made 3 separate orders. We have their different order ID for tracking of each order. And so what I want to do is go back, let me right click to the design view and of course get rid of the order ID because I don't need to see that. I just need to see the customer name and the quantity, the total books sold for that customer, so I can go ahead and find the top 5 out of those. So let me go ahead and hover over the top gray bar for that column there. You can see my pointer is turning black pointing down. When you see that, click on it so we can select it and then delete it to remove it. So what I can do here, as you recall in an earlier training video in our queries, I can come up here to the design view to the show hide group, click on the totals button. It adds the total row down below where I can go ahead and group my customers by name. Because remember how it listed those customers who had more than one order twice, 3 times, 25 times, I mean depending upon how many orders they have. I don't want it like that. I want those customers who are listed more than once or who made more than one order with us listed just once. So I want to group them all under one customer name. And then for the books sold, I don't want to group the books sold. I want to be able to get the sum of the books sold grouped under or grouped by a single customer name and not have them listed 2, 3, or 4 or 5 times. So when I click on the Run button, let's see if this works. There we go. It took all the sales that we've made to the customers and it grouped it under one name and not duplicating it if they made 2 or more orders, and then gave us the total of that grouping. So now if I wanted to, I can go ahead and sort this column here, ascending or descending, so I can get either smallest to largest or largest to smallest, which is what I want because I want the top 5 customers who've made the most purchases from us. So I want to come up here, click on the drop down arrow and do descending, largest to smallest. So there's my top 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, that's not the top values query, but I wanted to show you you can do it that way. The problem to consider with this, doing it this way, is that yes, you get the top 5 up here, you can sort ascending or descending, but it lists all the records. So if you had hundreds or thousands of records, I just want to see all that needs to be seen, not that could be seen. I don't need all the others down below. So that's where the top values query comes in. Let me come up here and remove my sort. Go back to the design view, and once I have it set up to not list the customer's name more than once, even though they have more than one order, and I've got the sum of that group, then I want to come up here on the design tab to the query setup group, and there it is, the top values feature. It doesn't say it, you have to hover over it, click on the drop down arrow. Currently it's displaying all the records. I can go ahead and say I just want the top 5, top 25, top 100, top 5%, 25%, or again view all of them. So when I go ahead and select the top 5 here, and I go back and click on the run button, there's a problem with this. This isn't the top 5. It's actually, it looks like giving me the bottom 5, the customers we sold the least amount to. Remember how we had it sorted from largest to smallest descending? Well, that's what we need to do. Go back to the design view. I'm not going to do it here because in the design view down on the grid, just below that field, books sold here, below the totals row, click in it, click on the drop down arrow, and we can go descending. And then go back and click on the run button. And then it gives us the largest down to the smallest. And because we're just looking for the top 5 of the largest here, it cuts off after number 5. So it doesn't display 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And conversely, if we wanted the bottom 5, then we would go back to the design view, switch it from descending to ascending, or let me go back to the design view. You can go back to see all and then click on the run button, and you can see again it's largest to smallest. If we just did the top 5, it would cut everything off, but again the largest 5 here. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.